If you were to say like, oh, I'm going to come out with a t-shirt. It's my first t-shirt. I absolutely need to have custom tags. Okay, why? Do you? Or do you just need to get your first t-shirt out?
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. This is the podcast where we cover growing and monetizing a fan base and building a music career with marketing strategies that are working based on what we see every single day inside of our music marketing agency and across our community of thousands of artists and bands. This is episode 399. We're going to talk simplicity today. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is Circa. And today, looking back on last week's episode, we took the customer journey of a fan, which has many stages, and we broke it down into 3 stages for you guys. Create attention, capture attention, monetize attention, with the purpose of helping you simplify where to find bottlenecks in your music career as far as your growth goes. So today we wanted to talk more about simplicity in a music career and how to take complex concepts and ideas and strategies and things that you're working on and make them more simple. And the inspiration for this episode came from a blog or a forum. I don't know what you would call it, but Cirque shared last week with me and Jonah a blog from a developer, and the first part of the blog talked a lot about simplicity in programming and in business, and it inspired me. And so that brought us to this episode today. Cirque, can you explain Grug to the listeners?
Yeah. So Carson Gross is the developer of a framework called HTMX. Basically, like, web pages are separated up into HTML, which is how things are structured, CSS, which is how things look, and JavaScript, which is how things behave. So you have structure, style, and behavior. But the way web standard was written, HTML was written, was HTML was supposed to be behavior too. We weren't supposed to have JavaScript. This is a theory called hypermedia. And so basically what happened was, over time, you might have heard the term React website or React native, right? And this is a framework in JavaScript that arose to deal with the challenge of like stateful websites. If I click a button, it should change in this way, and I shouldn't have to refresh the whole page to get it to change. And he basically built a library that's like, hey, let's stop going crazy with the JavaScript frameworks and putting all of this bloat onto web pages, and let's just lightly extend HTML to have the behavior you want. So if you click a button, you should be able to replace the HTML with other HTML from the server. Call to the server, hey, I need this little snippet of HTML. The user just clicked this button, boom, and this code replaces that, what the button was wrapped in, with that HTML, and your website can change based on what users do. And the reason I explain that to you, the reason it's necessary preamble, is because it's very simple. If you use HTMX, you don't have to install React, build React components, do all this crazy BS, because you can just swap out HTML from your server. Oh, I got to call it this endpoint. I'm going to give back this HTML. Great. We're all good here. We don't need to add all this crazy stuff to this like makes it really hard to debug. So he's very much simplicity driven. And he wrote an essay about what he's learned in programming across, I think, 2 or 3 decades, called grugbrain.dev. Their HTMX is a very meme-heavy culture. If you go to their Twitter, you'll notice this. For instance, like, if you can fill out a form on their website to be listed as the CEO of HTMX, and if someone writes in an email to them asking to verify your title, they will. They keep an index of anyone who's requested to be CEO of HTMX.
Hilarious.
So it's very cool, very funny people, very chill. And this essay really captures sort of the spirit I've evolved in programming and in life, really. And it's all about how you'll see a lot of stuff out there in your journey as a developer where people will try to add complexity to things because it makes them seem smarter, gives them bigger paychecks, gives them more raises and promotions and stuff. But it actually makes for just worse software, and it makes it harder to deal with the software that gets written, and shit just breaks all the time, and it sucks to work with, and it's just not fun. And so if you want to build maintainable software that's like fun to work on and stuff, you have to grapple with complexity primarily.
And this extends beyond software as well, which is what kind of inspired me upon reading it, because I'm not a developer, or nor do I really pretend to be very often. But this certainly applies to business as well, and it applies to marketing. And I am someone who over the years has tended towards complexity. Cirque can definitely attest to this. And when it comes to building systems and processes and working on things for our clients, our artists, our team, I have tended towards complexity over, the earlier parts of my career, especially because sometimes when you're building a complex idea, it feels like you're getting a lot done, or you're solving a problem with all sorts of bells and whistles and gadgets, when in reality, all you needed was a hammer to hit the nail. And I think that this is something that is really applicable in music careers as well, just as much as it is in a music marketing company like ours. And I'll give you an example from the agency directly. Over the last couple months, we had a client that we were running some campaigns for. And funny enough, they went and were listening to a bunch of our podcast episodes and also reviewing some workshops and trainings inside of Indie Pro, because all of our IndieX clients have access to all of our content, which is cool. Most of them don't watch it, and that's fine because they get to work with us. However, sometimes they do watch it, and then they have questions about why the things that we're deploying specifically for them aren't exactly word for word what's in a workshop or what's in a training. And sometimes what's being deployed and run for a client is simpler because it should be. And it's very easy to digest information that you get, whether it's online on YouTube, whether it's in a course that you buy, whether it's from somebody that's teaching you something directly, like a coach. A lot of times it's really easy to take information, digest it in a way that's complex, and try to build yourself a whole bunch of things that you don't actually need. And it's a really big temptation to do that, especially if you operate in a similar way to me. If you're like me, I fall into this trap all the time. And this was a really good example with this one band where we talked to them and we were like, yo, we got you. Like, you don't need the bells and whistles that were being discussed in whatever article it was that you just read. Like, chill. You've got optimal setup right now because of who you are. And the specifics of the things that you need to build right now are only this. You don't need X, Y, Z things because you're not the person that was writing the workshop or writing the article or explaining the video, or you're not the band in question that was being talked about, or the artist in question that was being talked about. And so I wanted to bring this challenge to you guys today a bit, to look for areas where maybe you've created overly complex things in your music career. And this can apply to the people that you work with. It can apply to the way that you manage day-to-day tasks for yourself. It can apply to the marketing campaigns that you're trying to build. Oh man, I've over the years audited so many just overly complex ad campaigns, for example. Oh, I'm retargeting people every single, I'm going down 20 days worth of retargeting campaigns contextually, each for one day at a time, with 5 different pieces of content for each. And it's like, no, you don't need to do that anymore. You're spinning your wheels. These are the kinds of things that are important to look at when you're auditing for over complexity.
Yeah, a few concepts I'd like to throw at you just to help, at least that have helped me in understanding how simplicity and complexity interact with just the generic specialization path. You're specializing along a path, you're learning how to do something. Typically, you're going to interact with it in these ways. One is first, let's get an example, which you probably are already familiar with, which is great communicators. Great communicators don't speak with crazy vocabulary. They don't speak with tons of jargon in their arena, their domain of expertise. They speak very plainly, very directly, very to the point. They're not verbose, meaning they don't say too much. And the path from just regular talk to a great communicator typically is a regressive one, where you start off, you really can't communicate much. You're not good at transferring something you understand in your head to someone else's head. But then you go through this overcorrection stage where you say way too much. You fall in love with the fact that you speak big word good.
So true.
You fall in love with the vocabulary you're using. You like sounding smart.
That's something that I've learned in sales, actually.
Yeah.
Because deals die in the details, right? When you start to ramble and get into too many specifics, all of a sudden,
you get really excited about the things you know.
Yeah.
And you lose sight of the things you wanted them to walk away with.
Yeah. And it creates questions and objections that you then have to handle and sometimes can't.
Yeah. They're not going to walk away with everything you know, and you have to prioritize what you want them to walk away with. And then you need to just shut out everything else and focus on that. And you learn that. You learn that, hey, wait a minute. The fact that I'm super smart, make big word good, not good for comprehende, right? Comprende. It's not good for the listener. And so you start to learn how to speak more plainly. You start to learn how to cognitively see, I have this point. Here's how I understand it. This is not the language they use. What's the language they would use? What's an analogy they'd be familiar with? You package that in, you blurt it out. It's like one single shot and it's really good. And that's like the stages of being a communicator. And you go through these stages in learning other pursuits as well. It's a fractal, meaning the same exact thing that happens with language and communication happens with engineering of any kind. Engineering. What's engineering? Engineering is the art of making things. It is both understanding what we want to make, coming up with the constraints. When we deliver this thing, does it meet X, Y, and Z? Those are our constraints for design, a spec. So engineering starts with understanding a spec. Here's what you want. I need to build something that satisfies those constraints. But good engineering is making sure it's just those constraints. What is absolutely necessary to satisfy X, Y, and Z? Any part of your system you build, any part of your thing you build, engineering something that isn't necessary for satisfying the constraints is actually counterproductive. It's worse. And so great engineers know this. They know, they will look at, something you built and they'll say, do we need this? Do we need that? Is this necessary? Can we do this a simpler way? You know what I would prefer? And engineers talk about this. You know what the best code is? No code. If I can do something with 0 lines of code, that's preferable.
You're speaking my language now, dude. Love this.
So engineering is just like language. It's not just about learning how to satisfy the constraints. I need to communicate this idea to people. It's about how can I do that with the minimal inputs, the minimal complexity. So those are the things you got to know about that. And then there's 2 types of complexity. There is accidental complexity, and then there is necessary complexity. Necessary complexity is all the things you got to do to satisfy the constraints. Absolutely have to do. If we don't do this, we won't satisfy X. If we don't do this thing, we won't get Z. That's essential complexity, necessary complexity. Accidental complexity is, well, I could actually write fewer lines of code if I did it this way, and it's a little fancy and it's harder to understand, which makes it more cognitively, more cognitive pressure to write it this way, but it looks slick. This is accidental complexity. Oh, I could do it this way, but this way's smarter. This way might be slightly faster, even though speed is not a constraint of our spec. You're starting to engineer for things that aren't necessary or aren't required.
Aren't problems.
And that's accidental. Yeah. Any complexity you introduce into your solution that isn't in service of the constraints, you are engineering in accidental complexity. And accidental complexity is the thing you want to avoid. Now, don't get me wrong. You also have control over your spec. You also have control over what the constraints are. So if you say, I absolutely have to have X and you don't, well, you just made essential complexity that's actual accidental complexity because you don't need that, right? So if you were to say like, oh, I'm going to come out with a t-shirt. It's my first t-shirt. I absolutely need to have custom tags. Okay, why? Do you? Or do you just need to get your first t-shirt out? You just made essential complexity out of accidental complexity. You said the constraint is it needs to have custom tags, but that requires a whole separate printer. It requires an attachment process, or it requires finding a printer that has both, but then your printer also has to satisfy your other constraints for cost and time. So you're engineering in additional constraints that don't need to be there. So these are the things you want to watch out for: accidental complexity and sneaky accidental complexity. You're asking for too much, and you need to actually bring down your ask. Those concepts I just spat out, that journey of becoming a great communicator and how it tracks with the journey of becoming a great engineer, the final stage, the expert stage, is to how can I remove as much as possible from this solution or from what I'm doing for my final product and still satisfy my constraints. And also, how can I be really rigid and mature about what I'm asking for, my constraints, the design spec for what I want to do.
This is the double-edged sword of creativity that is so often an advantage, I think, for artists and musicians in their business careers, especially when it comes to marketing. Is like the double-edged sword is like, wouldn't it be sick if, or what if we could also do, and you stack a billion of those onto what was originally a very simple and good idea, and all of a sudden you've got, a dragon that you have to slay. And that makes it really hard. Here's another example. Take the t-shirt concept that you just talked about. I haven't launched new merch in a while, so I'm going to launch a new line of merch. But before I do, wouldn't it be sick if I got all my fans to vote on each piece of merch design? All of a sudden, imagine the complexity that you just introduced because of your light bulb moment idea. You need to be able to filter out what's important for the end goal and what gets you there versus what can be, trimmed around the cookie cutter, so to speak.
Yeah. I think also, like, for those of you out there who might be in this stage of falling in love with your own creations, right? Of being in love with, your verbose, high vocabulary, highfalutin sense of communication. You're in love with your ability to engineer complex Rube Goldbergian automations in your marketing. I think both Jack and I are guilty of that, are going to break. They're written so that they will break. They're gonna break. And when they break, are you going to feel as charged up and super smart, or are you just going to ignore the break?
That's a really good point.
Doing something useful in a way that you never have to replace is better than doing 50 things that are useful that you will have to update.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Look into the crystal ball a little bit at what the future might look like when a system or a process or a campaign or whatever totally breaks down, and how you'll want to react to it. And if you're not excited about fixing it and making it better then it might be worth putting the brakes on that idea.
Building a business is about building processes, systems. You're literally a systems engineer. If you're not a systems engineer and you're building a business, your business is going to fail. Hey, sorry, your business is going to fail. Because that's essentially what building a business is: systems engineering. You're building systems that should fulfill critical business functions over and over again, day in, day out, without you needing to manually do everything. And when you're building those systems, you realize that every step in every system is a liability. It's something I have to maintain. I have to look after. I have to understand how it works. And this is something that as a programmer I experience, and you will experience yourself, which is, how am I going to know how this thing works when I crack back into it in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? Is this self-documenting? Yeah. Do I leave behind rigid notes, or am I going to have no clue how this works and I have to spend a week rediscovering that, get it all the way right?
Am I even going to remember the monster that I chained up in the basement?
Yes. And so that's called maintainability. It's another critical concept. And it's something that is a bitter lesson, because when you first start out building systems or engineering in any way, you're going to be like, oh, what are you, a wimp? Like, I can maintain this. And only until you actually experience it, you're going to fade it.
Dude, it's the worst. It's the worst, hardest, most bitter pill ever.
Yeah.
The first time it bites you, I'm having PTSD right now.
Now I've gone back into, like, I've been programming for about 2 years now. And if I went back into something I've built, 16 months ago, I'd be horrified. But if I go back into something I built 4 months ago, I'm going to be like, oh, wow, this is really self-documenting. I come in here and I am able to naturally discover how it works really quickly, because it's very simple. You start at the entry point and you naturally get led to all the places you need to go, and everything makes sense. And it's very simple. It's not complex. There's no side effects. There's no hidden logic. There's no magic at play. And that's another thing, is like, magic is really clever. being able to like click a button here in Slack and it triggers a cascade of functions in a Zap, like that's really cool. It's really, oh wow, it's impressive. But when you go back in to manage it, because it's so magical, it's hard to understand how it works. And that's true of any system you're going to design. There's going to be the impetus to engineer in magic. And the problem with magic is not in the near term, it's in the long term that magic really sucks. So just to say that, like, as you're building out systems for your business, it might be, this is the system by which we create new merch. This is the system by which we record an album. This is the system by which we plan a marketing campaign for that album. This is the system by which we run ads. Like, all of that is systems you're engineering for you and how you work. And they adhere to these principles.
100%. Hopefully this gives you guys, this was really meant to be like a tactical episode and maybe a little philosophical and also fun to explore how Circa and I think about business and also compare and contrast what he's learned as a developer over the last, 3 years now, especially combined with the skill set of running businesses versus my skill set of running businesses without the developer nature, but also being a bit more of, I would say, probably more of a systems minded guy from the jump.
100%. Yeah.
That's sort of been our like superhero duo thing that we have going on. Is Circa is like an amazing visionary and sparks the flame that starts something. And then I come in and take the fire and put it into a box and I've harnessed it.
Yeah.
And so hopefully this allows you guys to think along those lines within your own music careers and your own businesses, whether you're operating by yourself or whether you're operating with a bunch of different people, and allow you to build more simple systems and maybe even look at some of the systems that you currently have or some of the processes that you currently do on a regular basis and simplify them now before they turn into a monster and cause you a lot of pain in the future.
Yeah. And hey, if you like how it feels when someone who doesn't know how to make solutions looks at your big, monstrous, complex solution and is like, wow, you really are smart. You did this all. It feels pretty good, but it pales in comparison to how good it feels when you show someone who's done that how you do effectively the same thing they did in 100 less steps, and maintaining it is like super dumb easy. They're like, you're a Jedi.
Yeah.
You're not just smart, you're a wizard.
That's the real magic.
It's about, it's the difference between knowledge and taste. Limiting yourself to only essential complexity is a matter of taste and experience, and something you gain over time. And hopefully this episode helps you to speed up along that journey to building systems for your business that are less complex and that are easier to understand, reason about, and maintain.
I hope this is a good one, especially for our managers that listen, because I think this is the kind of stuff that in many cases, you as a manager are uniquely qualified to help your artists and bands with, steer them in the direction of building the machines that will actually help them and not hurt them. So I hope this was helpful for y'all too.
Yes.
Well, go get simple, indies. We'll see you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace out.
Can y'all really feel the East Coast?